Hello, I'm Li Hao. So in the last video, I talked about keyed each block. In the video, I share with you the differences between an each block and a keyed each block. In particular, how they updates. Right. So in the video, I tried to explain to you with a lot of hand gestures, and I'm not sure whether you get it or not. So in this video, we're gonna see how keyed each block is different than each block through visualization. Right, so this video is gonna be visualized. I have prepared a very simple example with a very nice slides. So let's take a look. So here is my slides, key each visualization. So let's first talk about how each block updates. So here I have an array, 4 items, right? Each with ID and name. And here is my code where I use the each block, where I each array as person. And in each iteration, I will render, I will have like a list item, which inside that will have a person.name as a content, as a text content. Right, so what you get is like this. Alfred, Bob, Danny, and Elliot. Right, so we look through all the persons within an array, and then there we have 4 list item. So what happens if I add a new item? So here I add the third item in between the first two. So right, I insert one item at the third position, and see what happens. So the first thing that's gonna happen is internally. So what I'm gonna show you next is it's gonna happen within Svelte conceptually, right? It does not happen one for one because Svelte may optimize the implementation, but conceptually it happens like this, right? So that if you get this idea clearly, then probably most likely or not, it will not change, right? The concept behind will not change. So what happens when you have this is what we need to prepare is what the end result would look like, right? So this is like the target result. This is what we want to end up with. So what happens is then we actually iterate through the target result, and so right now we are looking at the first item, which is Alfred, and then we compare with the first item of the current DOM, right? What we have currently on the screen versus what we're gonna end up with. So if compare the first item with for the target and first item for the what we have currently, right? It looks the same. The text content is the same as well. So we move on to the next one. So the second item, second iteration, we have person on name, which is Bob. And it's exactly the same of what we have on the screen. So we move on to the next one. So the next person on name is actually Charlie, right? In our array, the third item is actually Charlie. But what we have on the screen is Danny. So Charlie is not equal to Danny, so we change Danny to Charlie. So over here, after the third iteration, after we update, it looks the same now. So we move on to the next one. Next one, we have Danny, because the fourth item is Danny right now. And what we have on the screen is Elliot. Danny is not equal to Elliot, so we update Elliot to Danny. And then we'll move on to the next one. So the next one is Elliot's, but on the screen we only have 4 list items. So what happens is we create another one, create a new item, and name it Elliot, and we insert it in the screen, right? Insert it into the DOM, and there you have the end results. So we have 5 items. As you can see over here in the process, we update 2 list items and insert 1 at the very end. Right? Although conceptually we know that when we look at the array, we know actually we added only 1 item and there's no change, right? We insert 1 in the center. But in terms of operations that Svelte does to update the DOM to match up what we want to render in the end, we actually end up with 2 operations, 2 updates operations, and 1 insert operation at the end of the list. So let's take a look at another example, which is to remove an item. Right now, if you haven't noticed, we remove the second item, right? Second item is Bob, but we remove it now. So this on the top, or the bottom right corner is what is the target, what will end up to look like, what we want to end up to look like. So once we have the target, we do the same operation, which is we compare item by item. Right, so the first item is Alfred. First item is Alfred in the screen. The same. We move on to the next one. Next one, what we have on what we want to render is Charlie. But on the screen we have Bob. So we're gonna rename that. We're gonna update that list item to show Charlie instead. And then we'll move on to the next item. Next item, what we want to render, what we want to see on the screen is Danny. The third item is Danny, but what we have, the third item is showing Charlie. So we'll update the list item, change it to Danny. And we'll move on. We have Elliot, but Danny is not Elliot. We update to Elliot and move on. Now we reach the end of the list of what we want to render, but we have some extra list items in the screen on the DOM. Right, what we do is we remove it. Right, no extra elements. So we remove everything, and this is what we end up with. Although by comparing the array, we know that we remove the second item, but if you look at the target results and try to update the current DOM towards that target results, what we do end up is we remove one item and modify or update 3 list item. So that is what happens under the hood, right? That is what happens. So is there a way that we can tell Svelte, the engine, tell it that, okay, actually, you know what? This is what actually happens. We remove only one item and just do that, right? Or tell it that, okay, we only insert one item in the middle of the list. Just do that. Can you do that? Well, we can. We can do that by using a key each block. So what key each block is different from normal each block is that we add this bracket, and in this bracket we have expressions telling Svelte that for each of the item within a list, what is the key? It can be anything, it can be any expressions, but whatever it evaluates into, what you see is that, okay, right now we created 4 elements, and for each of the elements, we also evaluate its key. So we use the person ID as a key. So on the screen, we have the key as 1, 2, 4, and 5. Right? So this represents the key of each of the item. And let's take a look at what happens next. So what's happened next is that we insert a third item, right, into the array. So this is what we will end up what we want to end up with, right? 5 items, each of them with the key, which is evaluated on the right. So what's next? What's next is Svelte will actually first go through the DOM, go through a current DOM, go through each of the item, and use the key as a key of a map. We will create a map, use the key as a key of the map, and then each of the value would be a reference to the actual elements on the DOM. So this is what we created. We have 4 entries in the map, 1, 2, 4, 5. Each of them is pointing to the elements on the DOM, right? So if you compare this item and this, they are exactly the same, right? So this is conceptually what happens. It may differ a bit on what actually happens under the hood, but this is what happens conceptually, right? Imagine when you have key each block, what we'll do every time we want to update, we will create like a mapping of a key to the actual element. And then let's take a look at what we're going to do with that mapping. So first is we're going to go through the target, and we're going to go through one by one and then compare the key of that element, and then we see whether we have that element on the screen or not. Right? So we have the first element is Alfred, and we look at the key is 1. We go through, look at the mapping. Okay, mapping 1 has Alfred, right? So the content is the same. Okay, let's move on. So let's look at the second element on the target results. We have Bob, which is the key 2. Let's take a look. Do we have key 2? Yes, we have. And the content is the same, so we don't do anything. Right? Next is Charlie. Charlie is key 3. Do you have a key that's number 3 in the map? No, we don't. So what we do is we create 1, and then we create that list element called Charlie and then insert it into the mapping, right? So this will be inserted later on, right? This is something we need. So we created one list item. And let's move on. We compare the fourth element, which is Danny, key 4. Do we have key 4? Yes, we do. Next, we have Elliot's key 5. So do we have key number 5 and Elliot? Yes, we do. In the mapping? Yes, we do. Okay, so we are done with the targets, and let's take a look. Let's go through the target again, which compares to the results, right? This time around, we just look at the key, right? We have created all the elements for all the keys that will end up to be, right, in the target result. We have already created all of them in the target, in the mapping, right? Things that are keys that already exist will also be in the mapping. So we already have all the elements we need. So now it's just go through the list. For example, we look at the key 1, compare key 1, okay, and then we go, and since it's already there, so we remove from the mapping, right? We don't need it anymore. Let's go for key 2. Key 2 on the results. Okay, that's correct. Now key 3, right? The target one is key number 3. It exists at this position right now. But what we have at the position right now is not key 3, is 4, right? So what we do is we insert the key number 3 inside this results. And then we move on, right? Next is key number 4. We have right now we also seeing key number 4 in the results in the current DOM, which is correct. Then we move on. Key number 5, we look at the DOM, key number 5, which is correct. Okay, and then that's all. And we take a look at the mapping. We have almost every element, all the elements is being used up, so which is good. And we can call it a day. So hopefully you can see that what we have go through so far is we only create one list element and then we insert it into the right position and left the rest of the elements untouched. Right? This is by doing the way we do this is by marking each of the element with a key, and then we use the key to compare whether that element exists or not. Only we create elements that if the key does not exist. Right? And when we want to update, we also compare elements based on the key. So if the current existing element, if the same key has the same contents, then we don't have to update them. Let's take a look at another example when we try to remove an item. Right? So over here we have remove Bob, just like how we did when we remove Bob, the second item in the each array, each logic block in the previous example. So let's do the same thing again. Let's go through. Right now on the screen we have 5 elements with 5 different keys, and what we want to end up is only 4 elements with 4 different keys. So first thing first is we go through all the elements on the current DOM and then build this mapping, right? So we have 5 elements and 5 different keys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now let's go through the target and see, go through key by key, element by element, and then see whether it already exists on the mapping or not, right? So we look at right now the key is 1. There's already a mapping. There's already an entry with a key number 1 in the mapping. Content is the same, so we move on. 3, we already have key number 3 in the mapping. Content is the same, so we move on. Key number 4, we have 4 in the screen. Mapping is the same in the mapping. Content is the same, so we move on. Key number 5, the same. We move on, right? Now, let's take a look at. Now let's go through a target. Go through each of the keys again and go through the current DOM, right? So first element is key 1, and what we have also key 1. Okay, so we can strike that off from the mapping. Second element is key 3. And let's take a look at currently we have key number 2, which is extra. Okay, so it does not mean that we're going to remove this immediately, but we're going to take it out from the DOM, right? And then, yeah, take it out from the DOM, that's all. Right? So here we color it slightly different, just to let you know that this is something, it was there previously in the current DOM, but we taken up temporarily right now. So with that taken out, let's take a look at the next element. The next element is key 3 on the DOM. which maps with what we have, and then so we move on. Right, key 4, we want key 4 next, and we have key 4 in the DOM. Let's move on. We want key 5 next, and we have key 5 on the DOM, which is great. So we have all the elements. We have all the elements in the targets, and let's take a look at what we left in the mapping. These are elements that we are not going to need it anymore because we have showed up all the target results. So these are extra elements, and we're going to remove it. So we clean it, throw it away. So we clean up the mapping by throwing it away, and that's all. So by the end of the whole update cycle, what you'll see is we'll end up with 4 elements with 4 different keys. Right, that element is removed. Right, so operation wise, what happens on the DOM is we remove 1 element, and that's all. We didn't update any elements and only remove 1 element, which is what we want. Let's take a look at a last example of a key each block update. Here, if you take a look at the array, we swap the second and the third item, right? So right now, the order will be Alfred, Danny, Charlie, Elliot. So we have we have our target, Alfred, Danny, Charlie, Elliot, key 1, 4, 3, 5. And what we have on the screen is 1, 3, 4, 5. Right, so first thing first, we create a mapping out of the current DOM. So we have all the keys and the reference of the DOM elements on this DOM. And we go through each of the key by looking at the elements, finding the key, whether whether key number 1 exists in the mapping, it does. Content, Alfred is the same. Okay, we move on. Key number 4 exists in the mapping. Content is Danny, the same. Key 3, Charlie, the same. We don't have to update anything. Elliot, key number 5 is Elliot, and we have key number 5 for the mapping, and Elliot is the same. We don't have to update anything. That's great. And now let's go through the list again by just looking at the key, right? We have key 1. We have key 1 on our first element on the DOM. That's great. Let's move on. We have key 4 on what we want is key 4, and what we have is key number 3 on the screen. Okay, that is not correct. So we're gonna temporarily take it out. Take it out for now, and let's take a look at the next element on the screen, which is key number 4, which match what we want, right? And that is that. So we can strike that off from the mapping, and let's take a look at the next elements we want to render, which is key number 3. And what we have instead is key number 5 on the screen, which is not what we want. But let's take a look at the mapping. Right, mapping wise, we have key 3 with a Charlie, right? A reference to a DOM element called Charlie. So we insert that in. Right, we insert that in, and since we inserted in, then we are good, and we'll move on to the next one. Right, so we look at the target. We have key number 5. Let's look at the DOM right now. Also key 5. So it's the same. And that's all the elements we have already. We already go through the target results, all the keys are there, and we call it a day. So that we have it. So key each update also will help us rearrange item, right? You see that we took the element Charlie out and insert it after Danny, right? This is what it will happen conceptually, but in terms of like what actually happens under the hood, whether we remove Charlie and insert after Danny, or maybe the other way around where we actually remove Danny and insert before Charlie, that is implementation detail. You don't have it could be optimized different ways in future. So we're not going to say that this is exactly what happened, but conceptually what you see is that with a key, you know that element has been rearranged, and the only operations you need to do is to pull elements out and insert it at the right position, and that will be it. Right, so we have seen 3 different kind of operations: adding, removing, and rearranging items, and we have compared that with how the update operations is done for each block. We see that there's a lot of updates if you don't have a key, and we see that if we have a key each block, the update operations will be slightly more so-called optimized. Of course, in terms of less updates on the elements, but of course you trade it off with having more memory consumed, because you have to have a mapping of all the keys versus the elements and go through a slightly longer operations of comparing elements with the key and the mapping and rearrange items, right? So there you have it. There you have the difference between each block and a key each block with visualization. So that's all. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Questions, comment down below. And as always, subscribe to my channel so that you get notified when the next one is out. So see ya. Bye bye.